How's it going, folks? We're back for episode 3 of the Popcorn Square podcast. And today we are going to be talking about AI, the writer and actor strike, amongst other things. So, once again, I'm Neff. I am here with
Buttons.
And Kage is still out fighting an illness. We'll get him back soon. We will get him back soon. Promise. But we're going to move along here. So, we're just going to share our thoughts on the writer's strike. As everybody knows, if you've been paying attention to cinema, in 2023, the strike has been a big topic of discussion. So I believe Buttons said that they finally came to an agreement and signed off on a few documents officially.
Yeah. So, for example, as you mentioned, we have both the writers and the actors strike. So what ye olde Google tells me here is that the writers strike officially, went from May 2nd to September 27th.
Correct.
And then we had the actors strike, which started back in July, and they reached a tentative agreement in November and ratified it just at the beginning of the month here in December on the 5th. Both of these strikes end up being the longest strikes for both of their genres in terms of, in the last 20 years or more. As far as what we're looking at and impacting, how this impacted Hollywood and cinema and everything is, most of our numbers, we're going to see huge losses in terms of California's revenue.
Correct.
As well as their jobs that are available. Obviously, California, Hollywood being one of the biggest jobs for the state.
Right.
Job
creators.
Yeah, job creators, employers, however you want to put that. But I mean, their strikes didn't just impact the writers and the actors, it impacted all levels of production. Our cameramen, our prop people, all of these, because you come to a screeching halt when these people go on strike.
Right.
And most of these studios, looked at, oh man, we're bleeding, not putting out any content, so we have to cut all of our employees that would have normally been on the payroll when content is coming out.
Right.
So it wasn't just impactful on their side, it was impactful across the entire industry. And of course, most of these things they brought up, which of course would have been in comparison to the impact that COVID-19 had on the industry when everything had to shut down for safety reasons for, to stop the spread.
Right.
Of course, unless you were on one of them yachts, in which case they were like party hardy.
Exactly. As far as AI goes, I'm all for AI in the sense of assisting with the creation of ideas, but I don't want the writers, I'm not going to say the actors so much, because I feel like the actors are kind of on the outside. The writers come up with the ideas, write them down, type them down, however they feel, and then the actor just follows up doing what they do, act. But most actors in Hollywood are not sitting down with the writers saying, hey, you should change this, or maybe we should go with this. That's something that happens during production, and it's an idea-based thing. They're not writing these ideas down. But as far as AI goes, I don't have a problem with with so much the AI being used to assist, but when they're kind of leaning back on the AI to facilitate every idea or come up with ideas for something, that's when I kind of have a problem with that, because it just takes the essence out of creating anything. Out of it, kills it basically. There's something to actually creating something with your own mind. Now, we've seen different aspects of AI where they're using it in a visual essence, and I showed Buttons this on YouTube. There was a video where a guy basically made his own AI trailer, and he input some information on ChatGPT, which we'll talk about later, and he created a trailer, post-apocalyptic type film with Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and all he did was he typed in what he wanted. The application spit out the frames. He had to put the frames together. He had to line up the vocals as well, because there's vocals behind it, and he had his own trailer, typed it up in maybe 15 minutes. Looked pretty good. as far as that goes, I don't really care for it in that aspect visually, because there's some things with AI that are a little off. I think it's kind of in its early stages. So I think if they could hammer out that and make it look more realistic, maybe it's something they can use here and there to assist with visuals, almost like how they use CG now, green screen. If they did that, I think that would be better. But a whole AI trailer, a whole AI movie, I'm not really feeling that idea right now, because I don't feel like they've really refined it. So from that aspect, I like AI. Facilitate with some ideas. Don't create the whole idea. And visually, I'm not really with it visually right now. So I do stand with the actors on that front, where they say, hey, we don't want to be having our likeness used and then abused by AI to where you can completely take us out of the whole equation. I agree with them on that. As far as the writer goes, I do understand, if you have an app that can come in and just replace you, you feel some type of way about that, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, someone still has to program AI, so you still do need the human aspect of this whole thing. So yeah, I agree with the writers and the actors on that front. Hopefully they square everything away moving on into the future. We'll see where AI goes. Once again, this is an idea that's being played around with. Doesn't mean it's going to stick around forever. It is impactful in certain ways, but like I said, it has a lot of refinement that it needs to go into, because at this point, I still think it's really early in those stages for full-scale use. Buttons, how do you feel about AI overall?
All right, so you touched on a couple of good points as far as what they're using this AI for, and what we might see in the future, how it would impact them. Of course, the first thing that I think of in regards to this is back in the 80s with the Back to the Future movies. So this is where we first saw the conflict of using an actor's likeness instead of paying the actor. They couldn't get Marty McFly's dad. I can't remember the actor's name.
Yeah, I
off the
can't
top of my
remember
head.
right now.
But they put him. He decided he didn't want to be in the second movie, or maybe there was a conflict for filming and he wasn't able to be in it. And so the studio decided, instead of recasting the actor or writing him out, they just use his image. They a computer generated version of him in the film, instead of getting the original actor. Now, what this meant for him, of course, was that he didn't get paid.
Correct.
So, that was why he sued the studio, because he says, no, you're using my image, my likeness. This is the face that I was born with. You can't just use it because I wasn't able to be in your movie. And you certainly can't use it without permission and without paying me for using it. And of course, this goes into copyright infringement, right? So of course, prior to this, there wasn't the technology available. You couldn't go out there and just be like, oh, I want to look like John Wayne, and let the computer create a computer generated image, John Wayne. And that's where the technology is catching up to us now, is that you can, we've seen in these movies, such as Paul Walker's image being, his brother, and then they go in and CGI it and it looks like Paul Walker instead of his brother. And then, of course, Harrison Ford, we de-aged him for Dial of Destiny, and we've done this in some of the other movies as well, where you take the actor. I think Robert De Niro did it as well for one of his films, where you go ahead and you maybe even Clint Eastwood kind of roll back. And then of course, if you're sitting there looking like, most of these actors, a lot of them get aged out of Hollywood. That's one of those big things. Oh, we got to get plastic surgery so that we can, remain young looking and youthful looking. I don't want to play the mother. I want to be the lead role. I don't want to be the grandmother. So that is another concern, obviously, with some of these studios, is that we can spend a lot of money on CG, we can spend a lot of money on AI, and eventually we can just write out the actors. Sure, it's no big deal. We'll just recast you in this role even after you've gone, even after you've passed away. We're just gonna pull up your image and we don't gotta pay you because you're not with us anymore. And same thing with the writers. You've got, hey, I came up with the idea myself, or maybe it was an idea that you pitched me for a story or for a movie, a television show, and I don't want to pay what you're asking, so I'll just let the computer do it. I'll just let AI, yeah, I liked that idea about that alien, and he lives in a I don't know, underneath the staircase or whatever, and there's this whole story about it, right?
Right.
And they're like, but we don't want to pay you the, 6 or 9 months to write the story. We don't want to do that. We just want to let the computer do it.
We can expedite the process and save money.
And then guess what? If I want to change the character's name to Fred, and you were adamant that it had to be Hank, guess what? I get to change it, and I don't got to pay you for it. Or maybe I only pay you an initial fee, which is what the main issue with the writer's strike was the streaming service royalties on that. So, you sit there and you say, hey, yeah, you wrote this story, and we're not going to pay you for all the royalties that come in because it's streaming off of our site versus, some of these actors and writers, they get put in contract that they get royalties for based of how many times it's viewed or streamed. When movies like that are sold to studios, stations and that air them on TV, they pay a fee. Just the same thing with music. When you play your music in a movie, there's a royalty associated with that, and writers weren't getting those kind of royalties through the streaming platform.
Right, makes sense. I have an interesting question, and this goes for Buttons and anybody else that's listening. Please comment in the comment section below. I have a question for everybody here. Where do you think that AI visually goes first? Do you think that you'll see that aspect of AI being used in movies per se, or streaming services first? My idea behind it is I think they would rather take the chance on streaming services because that the cost of basically making a show, now it is inflated, but I feel like in general, we talked about in the episode before, they're cutting down the size of episodes, so that's also bringing down the cost of putting out the product. I feel like they would be more inept to actually test that AI visually on a series rather than a movie, depending on who puts the movie out. Because like we said with Marvel, Disney, superhero movies, we'll see where they go in the future with that, if they step back from superhero movies or not. Those movies are costing $200 million, some $250 million. So it's more of a gamble to go and use that. And then also when you have that much money being put out, and you have bigger name actors, because I'm not really seeing a lot of movies that have $200 million, $250 million budgets without A-list actors in it. So now it goes into what Buttons was saying. Now I have to argue with this actor because he doesn't want to look like this or say this, right? Do they test it there, or do they test it on a streaming service where you might have some C-list actors there and you can do a little more, and even those guys might be more open to letting that happen because they don't have those big egos that you see that are attached with an A-list actor, someone that's been around 20 years and has more say during the production process of a movie. So I feel they would test it more on like a Netflix show, Hulu original, something like that. What do you think, Buttons?
So I will touch on a couple things that you said there to answer your question. First being is, obviously if you are an A-list actor, you command what you want out of a studio or a writer or a director for that matter. If you go up to them and you say, I want to put my name on a project that they're presenting to you, and you say, yeah, absolutely, but there's always that but when it comes to those A-list actors. But I want the character to be this, or I want his lines to be this, or, they want that input. I mean, a good example, and this is for the good of the movie oftentimes, or the show, but a good example would be Ryan Reynolds when it comes to Deadpool.
Correct.
They presented him after the first Deadpool with a script for Deadpool 2, and he said absolutely not. He looked at the script and he said, this is not a good script. And he made them go back and change a lot of the material in there because he said it wasn't true to the source material. He said it had a lot of flaws, and they basically rewrote it. I don't know how much of it he had like an actual say in it, or if they just went back and said, hey, if we want to keep this actor, we have to appease him. And so A-list actors can do that. B-list actors can maybe get away with some of that. C-list actors, no. They're not having any say. They're not going to be able to go up to the director and say, you know what, I think my character should be more like this. Or, and the director might listen, but more than likely if the director's like, no, he needs to be this way, or you can get off the set. And we see that with, when you go back and you watch some of these super successful movies that, the first time you watch them, you're like, oh man, this is a great movie. And then you find out later that's like, Michael J. Fox wasn't the original Marty McFly, and you're like, oh, why is that? And you find out these little behind the scenes things where it's like, oh, this actor didn't get along with that director. And it's like, hey, if you aren't able to be respectful of your material, whether it's the writer, the director, the studio sometimes even, then guess what? They're going to boost you. They're going to get rid of you.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the executives.
Yeah, exactly. Where is the money coming from?
Exactly.
Because that's who's calling the shots. And these studios, that's what they're trying to do with this AI. They're trying to say, look, we respect your idea, however we want it this way. And if you're not going to give it to us, we're going to find a way to get it.
Right.
And I think they're using some of this AI, or they will use it to basically get what they want out of it. The writers being difficult, the actors being difficult. Let's just, the writer's like, oh, I don't have time, or you're going to have to pay me extra to go in and fix it the way the actor wants it, or the director. All these rewrites and things that happen behind the scenes in these movies and TV shows, and they're like, hey, AI is great for that, let's just do that. And then the actor's like, well, yeah, but now I'm not getting paid for rewriting those 3 or 4 pages that the director wanted, or the studio wanted to change, or it didn't test well.
Correct.
And I will say something, question for you as well, Neff, is when it comes to the strike, I know there is only a very limited, like 3 years or so on this. What do you think is going to be, when it comes back to the contract, what do you think is going to be the main focus?
I think the focus is still going to be how the writers and the actors are getting treated overall. I think it's about treatment, right? And then almost pay second. But I think depending on how fast this AI moves, I wonder if in 3 years, if it's even going to be something that they're even talking about at that point in time. I feel like if the AI continues to progress as far as from a writing standpoint, and especially from a visual standpoint, then you might have a bigger strike than what we just had. Like we said, 3 years is nothing. Snapping is 3 years, you know what I mean? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens from that aspect. But I think it's going to be a treatment issue, and then it's going to be a pay issue, and then everything else underneath. I feel like maybe if the AI thing fades out, might be a different negotiation next time around. So that will probably end 2026, 2027, that next contract. So yeah, like I said, it just depends on where the AI goes, I think. If the AI fades out, contracts might be a little more simple, negotiations might go by a little easier, and you'll get an agreement faster. You won't have this long, drawn out, you know what I mean, people protesting, it's on national media, mainstream media news like that. I don't think you'll have that. It'd be probably more low-key. But I just want to see where the AI goes with that. It's funny you brought up Ryan Reynolds, because Ryan Reynolds, he's almost like the polar opposite. And when I say the polar opposite, I'm talking about the outcome of what happened for him. Ryan Reynolds has Deadpool, correct? I think after the success of the first Deadpool, they were more inept to listen to what he had to say and bring to the table. Henry Cavill did that, and it was like, hey, man, we know you like the source material, but maybe the executives aren't jiving, the director's not jiving, you know what I mean? And that's been a big thing about Henry Cavill, good actor, but I guess the thing is he's real big into the source material and having respect for it and following it, which makes sense. And he's probably one of the few guys that stand up and say, hey, let's follow the source material. And it seems like from how the media projection is, oh, you know, this guy's kind of like a thorn in the side. That's why he left The Witcher. Now, I don't know what happened with the DCEU. There was all this speculation on if he was coming back or not. We know he's at the end of Black Adam, right? So Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, was advocating for him. Henry Cavill was excited to come back, and then they kind of just cut the cord on him, and it just seemed a little wishy-washy on how that whole thing played out. But yeah, if you're not A-list, if you're on a movie and it's the first time the movie's being made, they don't know how the movie's going to do, you can't really say anything at this point. Ryan Reynolds has more freedom to say things because Deadpool 1 and 2 have been successful, right? And speaking of Ryan Reynolds, he was putting out information about people taking pictures on set and leaking certain, details about the movie, and he kind of played along with that, putting in the Predator in there, 20th Century Fox. So that was cool. And like we said, we're excited to see Deadpool 3. But yeah, that was a great point that Buttons had brought up. You have anything else to add, Buttons, on that?
I will just say briefly, since Kage is not here to weigh in on this, these last couple episodes that we've been doing, he did bring up a lot of valid information, especially about the writer's strike, which we tried to kind of touch in on, which is simply, this isn't a very long period of time before the next contract is going to be done.
Correct.
And as you mentioned, you're going to, blink and it's going to be time for negotiations again. Kage's main point that resonated with me was the fact that you're only going to be able to get so much content out. And I do think our movies between this year, 2023, and the movies that are slated to come out 2024, this is where you see this bottleneck effect, which happened all the way going back to, the COVID-19 from 2020, and then these strikes, which is the excitement level for some of these movies. I mean, a movie can have a lot of hype around it, a lot of positive press, a lot of build, and then the further it gets pushed out, that dies down, that backs away, and these studios hurt themselves, in my opinion, when they let these strikes and things
linger
on and draw themselves out longer, because we sit there and look at, okay, look at all this movies, all these content, when are they coming out? I don't know. Well, I guess I'm just gonna wait until I see some news about it. But other people are sitting there going, like, how many more times are they going to have to rewrite this or push it back, or oh, we're not going to release it this year, and how much money are they wasting and spending on this? And
you're testing the audience patience.
Exactly. The fans is what you're testing.
Exactly.
Some of these movies have huge fan bases, and as you said, they are the ones who can sit down and advocate for actors and roles. And same thing with directors and writers when it comes to that, is like, hey, you see a director attached to a movie or an actor attached to a movie, and then you hear about some fallout between them, it's going to put some negative press. And these studios, they're all about making money. They're all about the bottom line. How much money did it take to make it, and how much money am I going to make for my studio? Because that funds future projects. That funds their own bonuses. That's, we look at where all the money goes at the end of the day, and they only hurt themselves, I think, when they draw these.
Exactly, and I'm glad you talked about little scuffles on set between so-and-so, maybe an actor or director. And I've told people, our colleagues before, now with the internet, social media, all of that can make or break your film before it even comes out. People can form an opinion, right? People can say certain things, and based off that, your film can do well or it cannot do well. We saw all the negative press with The Flash. We saw how that went. We're seeing negative press about Aquaman 2. We're going to see how that goes. Like I said, we're going to go watch the film. We'll be rating this thing based off our metric on what we think is a good film or what makes it good or bad, and then we'll come and talk about that. But like we said, leading up to that film, a lot of issues. So we'll see how it pans out. Anyway, guys, that will be episode 3 for the Popcorn Square podcast. We thank you for tuning in. Once again, if you're new here, please like, subscribe, comment. Please comment. Like I said in multiple episodes before, we love open discussions and we'd like to hear from you. So thanks for tuning in. Be safe.